Good evening, good morning, or good afternoon to you all, and welcome to another episode of Eat the Storms, the poetry podcast, coming to you perfectly pre-recorded to avoid any panic on platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google, Breaker, Podbean, Pocket Cast, Overcast, Castbox, Podcast Addicts, and iTunes. My name is Damien B. Donnelly. I am your host and producer and delighted to have you back again for another storming hour of poetry and diversity. We have another lineup of 5 guests today, from me here on the east coast of Ireland, over to the west for a Cumbrian poet, then over to Lancashire and 2 visits to London and the United Kingdom, to finally a trip to the United States. Today we have wolves, foxes, birds of prey, headless pigeons, spiders, strips of roads, boats, benches, beaches, Belfast, chins and grins, hometowns, and evening hums. So whatever you need for a poetic fix, I believe we have you covered. So step away from scrolling through TikTok, take a time out from Twitter, and let the next hour be purely poetic. With the podcast, perhaps a pint, and certainly a piece of pie. My name is Damien B. Donnelly, this is Eat the Storms, and I hope you enjoy the show. We are kicking off this episode today with a first-time guest to Eat the Storms, taking us over to Leicestershire in England for a poet, novelist and journalist, with work appearing in places like Bad Lilies, the Rialto, Poetry Salzburg and Acumen. He is an alumnus of Faber's Advanced Poetry Academy and was awarded a place on the Writing East Midlands mentoring scheme under the tutelage of Helen Mort. In 2021, he was second in the McClellan International Poetry Prize. In 2022, he was runner-up in the Prole Poets Laureate competition, and this year he is Poet in Residence at Leicestershire Botanic Gardens. I am delighted to hand you over to Tim Relf.
Hello, my name's Tim Relf. Thank you for having me on the podcast. I'm speaking to you today from lovely Leicestershire in the English Midlands. I'd like to read you 6 poems today, if I may. The first one's called The Burrowers. The Burrowers. I once woke, my face wedged into a rabbit hole. Soil, grass, a field, fields, a faraway cottage. I stood, wobbled, stumbled back to the 5 a.m. end of a party. I remember this as a young man apologises for having overdone it at a dinner party I hosted last night. He'd gone out for a smoke and bang, lights out. We'd carried him in and put him to bed on the sofa at 9 p.m. Sorry, he says, shaking. Seriously, man, I'm sorry. I'm such a dick sometimes. Tears, I can see, are coming. Nothing bad happened, I reassure him, remembering this reaction a handful of times. There's a mark on his cheek, mud or grass. His face had been against the lawn when we hauled him up, like he was trying to get into the ground. I woke up in a rabbit warren once, I tell him, like an actual rabbit warren in a field. Sparko I was, covered in rabbit crap, holes everywhere. He wipes his cheek, smiles, the ghost of last night's smile. I tell him I'll put the kettle on and tea, he says. Tea would be good. I don't mention I spent years on repeat, trying to dig clear of myself and the earthy, bad taste I left in my own mouth. No, I won't mention all the other times it was lights out, just that once, waking up in the warren, in the dew-clung dirt, with shit on my shirt and soil under my nails. This is called Not Even October. Not even October, and I'm dead set on a fire. The year's first. Barely cold, but I want to lay kindling, strike a match, smell autumn. The same as a kid. The sleepovers, beaches, bike rides, always the next thing, always tomorrow. I've got good at this, wielding an axe, wood splits, a hollow ring. Soon now, I'll sit and watch today go up in smoke. This third poem is called Long Lines. Long Lines. Bollocks to Laurie Lee. We didn't need some old dude to tell us how it felt to hide in hedgerows, pockets, alive and heavy. Gone we were, in folded fields by moonback streams, diving for cover at a dog's bark or a door opening. Poaching my arse. Nobody owns fish, everyone knows that, so nightly we'd string out lines, then return to collect the spoils, flesh-speckled gifts from another world. But first, JPS dizzy and smashed on spar cider, we'd dance in car parks and churchyards, singing along to cassettes. And now, ironing a shirt, about to drive to you, the word cassette seems as incongruous as poaching did then, as unreal as crematorium had this morning when I'd Googled directions, as antiquated, I suppose, as the term Google itself may one day come to be. Tomorrow, early, I'll set off. I'll tread respectful, measured steps, read careful, well-judged words. But I'll be stealing along hoof-pocked paths, doubled up and clumsy quiet in August when the Slad Valley was ours. Two wild, uncatchable boys magicking brown trout from the racing heart of the world, and afterwards, dancing. This poem's called Reading Banville. Reading Banville. Cicatrice gets me googling, as does Horrant, Minatory and Coevals, ditto Decal, Flocculent and Satyr. How can I have got to this age and not know so many words? How can I have gone through this noisy, talking world with so much beyond me, so much ignorance? What might I have said, done, been, had I had this man's vocabulary? But I'd only need it if I wanted to write about it, to see, say, to explain how it makes me feel, and I have no desire to do that today. Instead, I'll go there, to the beach. I'll stand barefoot, choose a pebble, nothing out of the ordinary, one that's egg-sized, brown, smooth, and hold it tightly. This is called Flat. Flat. The new floors, kitchen and bathroom I can just about cope with. I'm fine with the built-in bookshelves and landscaped patio garden. Ditto the high ceilings and period features this Victorian conversion apparently boasts. But why is there a cot in my room? A baby's cot. Away I'm led. Now, not even the rattle of trains. Edited out or avoided in the 841 square feet on this quiet residential street in the highly desirable area known as Little India. I'd heard this suburb referred to as Nappy Valley, but never envisaged this. A cuddly dolphin, diving, a mobile with red, blue and yellow fish hanging. Whatever possessed me to think, I think as I press pause, that I had any claim on this place. My life here, there, one frame frozen out from the bigger picture, this spacious, split-level conversion with scope to extend. An irrelevant still from 2 decades back, predating an estate agent's marketing device. Yes, I'll take the video tour, but only when I hit stop, in the bumps of the banister, the top of the stairs turn, the lounge, ceiling, slope, the 6 steps before you stoop, skyline through the window, clouds through the Velux. Only when I close my eyes, my suitcase under the bed, a cereal bowl on a pile of dusty CDs, coins, scattered on sides, notes by the phone, an overflowing bin, soft voices through walls, are the particulars of a world once waiting for me. This is called I Once Got on a Bus. I once got on a bus in Woodstock, New Brunswick, and rode for 2 days solid south to Atlanta, Georgia. It's a go-to story when I'm feeling old or mortgage stressed or fretting, say, about the evening train. Not the New Jersey Turnpike again, my wife will say. Not Columbus Avenue. Not the midnight slice of blueberry pie. Humour me, I'll say, and she will, aware that even the word greyhound can lift me. What I'm remembering, of course, when I refer to the 95 or Kennebunkport or the Carolinas, when I talk of pine woods and white churches, is the version shaped by my own telling, the story within the story. It's the usual stuff. A bus barrelling down a snow-sided road, winter-lit town names echoing home, 1,500 miles of eastern seaboard. There's a part I don't recount, though. It's the story within the story within the story of a boy swapping sides on a bus so he can better see a river. It's early on, before he's even left New Brunswick, when he presses his face to the glass because the name of that river makes him want to touch all that's beyond, the land he'd later learn of the Maliseet. Today, queuing in a supermarket in Corby, I say the word out loud. Meduxnakeg.
We have returning guests next up on the podcast, and this time it's a guest who I had the pleasure of hearing and seeing read live earlier this year at the Over the Edge event in Galway, which is part of the memorial for the late Kevin Higgins. She has a background that covers TV production all the way to customer services rep, but since moving to the west coast of Ireland, this Cumbrian poet credits the West as the creative catalyst for her return to both gardening and poetry, and we are all the happier for that. Her work has appeared in places like A Bridge, A New Ulster, Green Ink Poetry and Skylight 47. She spent several decades in recovery from mental and physical illness, which unfolds in her work, no more so than today, which she will shortly explain herself. I am delighted to welcome back to Eat the Storms, Terri Metcalfe.
Hi, thanks so much for having me on again, Damien. It's really a thrill to be here. So I've been putting together a first collection, which is something I never thought I would say, but there it is. And what I would like to do with it is centre it around my own mental health struggles, but also to explore others' experiences, as well as the healthcare system and social stigmas around mental health. And so for it to become less of a exercise in cathartic self-searching, which it would be as well, but also something as a tool for us as society to uncover the truths and highlight misgivings that do sadly occur in mental health care, and also to showcase the arts as a practical prescription for recovery from mental illness. And so my first poem comes from a time when I wasn't very well at all mentally. It was first published, it was written a long time ago, maybe 10 years ago, but it was first published just last year by Skylight 47, and it's called Black Dog. Black Dog. A creature of habit, her long shadow comes in the early evening. She bares her teeth and lays down, in for the night. I'm tethered to the bed like a forgotten sailboat, drifting in and out of greys and blues. I think about moving. She opens one eye and quick as gunfire shoots an invisible anchor. I go back to imagining pictures in the wood chip ceiling. The devil's in the detail. She's old now for a dog, but sharp like a freshly wound clock. If for once I should catch her slacking, the tick-tock slowing, I'd run in the time it took to strike, stand at the top of the stairs and shout, "I'm here!" I swear I would. My next poem was first published by the Poetry Cooperative in their Fearless anthology, which was a book to promote the arts as a tool for positive mental health. And the poem's called Wolf. There is a wolf behind my ribcage, red-lipped with hunger, flashing teeth and starved bone. She moves to barn owl shrieks, her stealth still as fallen stone, perfect quiet in cold stars. Her forest leaps are soft as moss, her paws padded with damp silver in moonlit curves of breeze. Bracken fur rises, delves into undergrowth, rich ribbons slicing the air. She takes on planets, my wolf in woman's flesh, stares them down to the size of marbles descending hillsides, pinpricks, dust particles, ghosts. Retreat is a blue hour before sunset. Love is the calm in her wild. This next poem is one of my favourites, of my own, but it's also one of my most rejected. I don't know if it's the subject matter or it's just not very good. I have had some help from Adam Wyeth in terms of trying to make it more accessible. So thank you to him. And I've played around a bit with form and shape, which I don't normally do. So it is quite a visual poem. So hopefully one day you might be able to read it in all its concrete glory, if somebody does pick it up. And it is called Picking. Cutaneous, relating to the skin, the uppermost layer of protective body cladding. Atop the fat, the muscle and sinew, fascia, bone and blood, the gravy. The scab that lies roughly a finger length up from the tip of my widow's peak, and maybe 2 centimetres to the left. Help me drop a dressmaker's tape along my parting, and I'll try to explain the distance between self and self-obsessed. The gauging of a person with fluid thought, against one who's let life rule in numbers, groups and weight. Is it normal to wait, normal to want, for the crust of cell upon cell, to attack it, rip it, hair and all, as a trophy? Where does the healing start, if not in the head, in the heart? In this next poem, I'd wanted to try and capture the feeling of realising that you've changed. And in my recovery, I have gone through a lot of changes. This poem's called In Opposites. I have had dreams, vulture high dreams, edge of earth, impossible dreams, blown leaf dreams flicking their browns like coins spinning, waiting for the fall. But never ambition, that solid creature, a thumb-tacked map, a ship of plans, a compass heart set for the end of a rainbow, until I discovered that all rainbows have a double, in which the second arc's colours are reversed. Light lives again in opposites. I've just noticed that I have a bit of a theme going here this evening. In a lot of my poems, I compare myself to animals. I've had dog, wolf there, and now a spider. My next poem's called False Widow. My mother comes from a long line of gentle creatures who showed each other how to save spiders from the bath. A steady hand, a sheet of paper, thick enough not to absorb the dregs of the last wash, thin enough not to confuse tiny legs. A door left ajar, a warm space where the heated house would not be missed. Today, in the shower, because I have read too much of The False Widow, I let the spider twitch into a curl, become a bead no bigger than a thought, a swirl of 8 legs, now one like a final cobweb spun down the drain. Sometimes I worry that I am the limb that breaks the pattern, the misunderstood leg that tumbles down the plug hole. My final poem today was written to remember the children buried at the Rockies Cemetery in Westport. The area, it was a former killeen, which, for those who don't know, is a burial area for unbaptised and stillborn children. It was chosen by Black Bough Poetry for their Sound and Vision collection, which was edited by Kitty Donnelly. It's called Killeen. This is now your mother. She'll never imagine a word from your first sound. She is rain settling around you, wept from birch boughs. This is now your father. He'll never sing your cries to sleep. He is wind, his lullaby chilled by wild sea breath. This is now your grandmother. She'll never pause to smile, tuck a soft curl behind your velvet ear. She is layers of bracken blanket. This is now your grandfather. He'll never imagine you growing old. He is yellow mittens of gorse flowers, spiked across your burial ground. These are now your Killeen siblings. Because no cross adorned your foreheads, you remain unmarked. Thank you.
Happy Pride Month, everybody. It's June and the month for expressing your colour, creativity and celebrating community. And at the end of this month, your favourite poetry podcast will be throwing its annual Pride Party. And here at Eat the Storms, we are hoping to have as many poets from as many countries as possible each read one poem on the show. So if you are a part of the LGBTQ+ community, then drop me an email at eatthestorms@yahoo.com and let the party commence. We are nothing without our community. Now, it's always a thrill to welcome new voices to the podcast, so this episode is a pure delight for me as we have 3 new voices joining us. Next up, we have a former adventurer and a writer from Northern Ireland, now living in London, with a previous stint living in Istanbul in Turkey. He is a hitchhiker and a hopeless romantic with a background in fine art, art history and political economy. His work has been featured in the Bosphorus Review of Books in Istanbul. Joining us today on Eat the Storms for the first time, this is Alex Scott.
Hi, my name's Alex Scott. I'm a Northern Irish person living in London. I have a background in fine art, art history and political economy. I used to adventure a lot, volunteering in Palestine, hitchhiking across Turkey and the regions. I've had a gun pointed at me, a few near misses. I lived in Istanbul during lockdown. I moved there to be with my partner, whom I'd met 4 years before, while on a solo trip to Istanbul. I moved back to London and I make time for creativity wherever I can. And during lockdown, I wrote and published a poem in the Bosphorus Review of Books. I've loved writing all my life, but have never given it the space it demands. I'd like to read 2 poems today. The first is called The Birds of Prey Back Home. There's a wilderness back where I'm from. It's not the mountains where Michael and I camp, for those morns are lifeless, true to name, Silent Valley. 3 days into a hike, I realised I hadn't seen a single bug, nor bird, nor bee. It's an open tomb where only the dead recall the life, for memory fades and we're seldom aware of the world nor lost to time. But there's a strip of road which runs from Belfast to County Tyrone, the M1 motorway. We take it when we go to visit Nanny in Portadown. I never liked that place. It's where my mum's from. She talks about picking strawberries as a little girl, her Auntie Gertie's baking, and Clowna junior high. I get the impression she was sad as a child, insecure and sensitive. Probably a bit like me. And maybe that's where I get it. I don't ask her enough about her life. There never seems to be time. Portadown is a world apart from my detached house in Belfast. Between the two sits the wild, a place where danger remains, a place where animals will crush you under steel, where raptors circle the sky. You can watch them from your dad's car. If anything like mine, it'll have 300,000 miles, a window that doesn't wind, and legroom filled with empty curtains. The car itself will often contain wildlife, towering spiders as big as your palm which sit in the corners and look at you as you inch forward as far as you can, the seatbelt restricting you to prey. But the motorway is wild, it's unexplored terrain, a place where a biped like me can lose his life or his hearing, quickly or slowly as required. It's a place where chaos collaborates as indicated by the eagles and buzzards above. I don't think people even recognise them, but it's okay. They can watch them on TV instead. Maybe if they knew what adventure lay in their commute, they'd burn it to the ground. We used to have foxes at my granddad's flat. He would leave them leftovers on the lawn every day. From the window we would watch a family feed. But one day they stopped coming. I think someone poisoned them. The second poem I want to read is called Cafetiere. I use a cafetiere with a glass carafe long since smashed. It has a 3-inch segment of missing glass from the top down, which leaves ample room for 2 decent-sized cups of coffee. But there are additional cracks to the base of the vase. Some words in white are visible peeking behind the casing. I scrape at them with my finger, and they make the sound of my dad's sandpaper from when I was young. I scratch the words which are French, close my eyes and let the memories play. I would love to be back there with him, learning the skills I never did. As the weeks go on and the cracks deepen, the ratio of coffee in carafe on counter worsens. Before, the cafetiere leaked as a teardrop, as though wounded from my clumsy hands which dropped it in the sink. Now it flows as a river, the coffee needing to be supped from the tabletop, unbrewed anyway. I've cut myself 4 or 5 times on the broken glass, but I don't mind. My mum bought it for me years ago. It was a donation into her charity shop. It nourishes me and connects me to home. I make coffee for my friends in it every day, and for my love when she stays. I will never throw my cafetiere to the trash. She is my connection to my roots, and she will remain long after my parents do not. So I make her into a terrarium. We'll go to the forest where I run, dig up some soil and create some life. She will go on nourishing me as she has these years. I'll look at her, never dispose of her. I'll nurture her little ecosystem and scratch at the white letters when I'm feeling wistful. When I'm missing my dad and the DIY that I never took an interest in. 7-year-old days and summer shorts, wasp stings, tea tree oil and tears. Belfast summers, a world of everything and anything. Family barbecues out the back. Blackened sausages around the patio heater. A time where I could hug my dad any time I liked, not just at the airport. A time where we said, I love you, and he would read to me at night. Thanks for listening.
Now, my penultimate guest on Eat the Storms today is fresh from his Zoom book launch last Wednesday night, with thanks to his publisher Black Bough Poetry's Matthew MC Smith. This guest is here to read from his very stunning debut collection, Street Sailing, which I'm delighted to say is our collection of the week here at Eat the Storms. And it's a testament to just how brilliant a poet this guest is, that he had so many great shining poets who came out to read at his launch. From Jen Farrose to Bryony Collins, Sarah Connor, Julian Day, Rona Green, Alan Parry, Mark Anthony Owen, to name but a few. This Bristol-born poet now dwells around the urban hills of south-east London while working as a copywriter. His work has appeared in places like Anthropocene, Atrium, and, I'm very honoured to say, The Storms Journal. Published by Black Bough Poetry, his debut collection is out now, called Street Sailing, and to read from it, this is Matt Gilbert.
Hi Damien. Thank you for inviting me back to the podcast. Today, I'm going to read 3 poems from my debut collection, Street Sailing, edited by the fizzing ball of poetic energy that is Matthew MC Smith. Street Sailing is available now from Black Bough Poetry. The first poem I'm going to read is the title poem, Street Sailing. This morning the houses are brick-built boats, windows flashing hope as light back into the sky. Tower blocks moored liners, pavements concrete seas, pedestrians shoe sailors, plotting routes to circumvent the doldrums. Courses set for the islands of possibility, somewhere out there beyond the break of day. Come evening, urban mariners return, Streets harbour bulky cargoes, pallets laden down with stress, disquiet, frustration, anxious to be unloaded with the tide. Stowed behind thick wooden doors or beachcombed cardboard covers, tied up and closed against the night before tomorrow's voyages must be underway. The next poem I'm going to read is about a trip back to my hometown, Bristol, in the west of England. Bristol. Light jabs of rain arrive against my face, like firm strokes from a metal pinhead hairbrush, poking me back in, on foot from Temple Meads, along a stretch of Avon. Today, wind-shredded, the river shrugs, surging toffee brown towards the centre, as discordant gull hordes scream, "Not you again!" cries shattering on contact with the air. And in their midst, one great black-backed fiend carts a headless pigeon off to finish on the dirty water. While nearby, reflex shoppers shuffle round the concrete remains of Broadmead. "Well, what do you expect?" ask rattled chimney pots, smokeless, scowling chess-piece kings, throned on worn Victorian rooftops, sharp crenellated crowns low-slung above the gloomy faces of rambling relic buildings, shaded in the city's signature pennant stone, 4B pencil grey. I'm back to visit between storms with names, and it seems we've changed, my hometown and me. The next one I'm going to read is from a beach on Portishead, which is just down outside Bristol. It looks over the Severn Estuary, and across the water you can see South Wales in the distance. And there's a old lighthouse at one point called Black Nor Lighthouse, which doesn't work anymore, but it's been preserved by a local society or friends group. At Black Nor Lighthouse. Lofted above a scaggy driftwood scattered beach, lording over chunks of rock, a stilted steampunk iron torch, painted in off-white. All warnings retired and snubbed by squatting seabirds, resting up on tiny Denny Island, out amongst the sandbanks, in cackling mockery of borders. Behind us, a small town rapidly expands. Ahead, the waters of the Severn unite the coast of post-industrial South Wales with this western edge of England. Here, someone's left a fire to smoulder. Its acrid smoke ghosts drift across the channel, where silhouettes of distant hills loom like invitations. The next one I'm going to read is called Forked. Now, there's the Irish name for swift in there, so hopefully I'll get it right. Forgive me if I don't. Forked. Early May. They're back, like kids grabbing at your face to get attention, yanking chins skyward with joyful screams. 4, 5, 6. Circling the eaves of a street corner house, poking at a blocked-up memory of nest, before the party's off, hurtling around other rooftops further down the street, forcing my mouth to fold, mirror the crescent of their wings, smile up a familiar shape, recalled in Irish as Gowlan Goy, the forked one of the wind. Their presence a guilty gift. Until, when autumn drops, they're gone. And as with all the years before, I'm bereft then left to wonder if we'll see their like again. This last one I'm going to read is called I Made a Mess of My Own Pathetic Fallacy. Lyme Regis let me down when I went there to insert myself into a metafiction, make a memory from the memory of a book. The French Lieutenant's Woman. Not for its romance. Smithson was too stiff, Sarah Woodruff more Victorian wet dream than living woman. At least, that's what I felt when I read it at 16, as if I'd had a clue. What I did like was the undercliff, the way it was described, birthing a place far thicker than the paper it appeared on, and why, years later, when my marriage fell apart, I stood there on the cob, at the spot where a woman who had never been faced out to sea, black-hooded, waiting like a ghost. My old blue anorak would have to do instead, as I asked an urgent question of the waves, which were not behaving as I wanted, not fierce or dark enough. And all the other tourists' chatter forced me to shout inside my head. What happens when the storm of love subsides? Where should we put the past? I got no easy answers. The bay speaks only water, and made my trousers slightly damp. Yes, salt foam went flying, but wasn't spitting for my grief. A few gulls cried out in passing, wheeling overhead. Not, I think, for me. Thank you.
For our fun destination today on Eat the Storms, we are settling down in the United States, on the East Coast in fact, for the founder of Poetry Hunger X, whose aim is to bring world poets and their poetry to the anti-hunger cause. He also formed the collective Voices of Woodland, using poetry, art and music to tell the story of America's tragic history of slavery at the plantations. His work has been seen in places like the Honest Ulsterman, Poetry South, the Iowa Review and Amsterdam Quarterly, to name but a few. His most recent collection is called Patchy Ways, from which you'll hear poems today, and was published by Cyber Wit Press. I am so delighted to hand you over to the perfect poetic stylings of Hiram Larew.
I'm Hiram Larew from the East Coast of the U.S. And yes, indeed, my hat is tipped in gratitude to Damien for his winning, gracious spirit. The poems that follow are from Patchy Ways, which was recently published by Cyber Wit Press. They all share the theme of love in its many guises. This first poem is about the love of the moment. It was first published in Reflections. It's titled Hats or Trees. We are alive, my love, and there is your chin. Or porch lights turned on and your grin, as far as fields or trains can see. What more than this can ever be, my love? This overhum of time that through whatever ways will become in dusk the breeze of hats or trees, my love. This just right here, this now, my love, and what's to come, and we're alive. And so, my love, these O's that blend, how mornings glow or evenings hum as all the gathers breathe. This poem is about the love of frustration. It was first published in Fevers of the Mind. It's titled Splashed Paint. Heaven in hell, what a day it's been. A devil of slams and broken down stuff. Starting with that sorted out curse of sparking volts. And then those cracks in bricks that somehow started leaking. Even more, that bam of a what the devil crash. And then, oh then, how paint somehow, dear God of spills, got loose. Yes, sir. A day of days when, I swear, I give up. Ended all of the dire and misery by stomping its hat flat dead for good. This poem is about the love of all of a sudden or sudden light. It's titled An Edges Lit. Whenever I'm caught by a splendor's glow from fingertips, whenever light seems to outline love with this could be, or when a flicker from behind stops me by heart, I'm wonder-stunned. And when I turn towards any bright that's all at once, I almost feel my ever-wills as time arrives sparklit. Such pure catch-eye along a leaf or grin is worth a living for. And even more when flashes call from evening fields like yets to come. When I glance an edges lit, or sudden's sheen, or color's glee, those slivers of, I stop at once for every this is why, or so much more than me. The final poem is about the love of childhood memories. It was first published by Angel House Press. It's titled, And Now. Please live with me as pudding so that we can go back in milky saucepans to when all wooden spoons stirred the morning, or to other chores of cracked corn, or sorting suds, or swirling yolks. Go back with me in apron time to a skimming off as cooling that topped the top for shredded coconut, for years ago, or raisins. Our greatest aunts of aunts, the ladles, or Windows ledge of hope, all wisps and cares rising at the corners. For every cupboard, its pudding cups. Be both then and now with me. The loved face clock up there, those raisins. Here's to eat the storms. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Hiram, and of course, thank you to all of my guests on today's show, and they were Tim Relf, Terri Metcalfe, Alex Scott, Matt Gilbert, and, as you've just heard, Hiram Larew. Now, just before I leave you today, I'm going to offer up two poems. One of them is mine and one of them is not. So I'm going to start with the one that is mine. And this is a poem that comes from my new full collection, which is coming out next year. And I actually read it at Matt Gilbert's lunch earlier this week, as I felt it sort of fitted in with his theme of streets, location, and a bit of discombobulation. This first poem is called Between the Floorboards, and I wrote this during COVID while locked down here in the cottage in Lusk in County Dublin, the family cottage, having spent the previous 25 years living in Paris, London and Amsterdam. So during COVID, I tried to unpack all those memories of all the other places that I touched into the floorboards here of this small bedroom in a cottage built back for my great-grandparents in 1904. Now, just to point out that I mentioned the word Lijnbaansgracht, that is the canal where I lived on a boat in Amsterdam for a year during my 10-year stint there. This is Between the Floorboards. This room is 17 floorboards wide. I know this because last year, when I thought 3 months was too narrow to condense the memory of all my movement into such a small space, I painted over the footprints that have twisted across its knots. Now, 15 months later, I have broken the floorboards into separate cities and tiptoe along their streets in different socks, trying to remember all the things I touched in the places these floorboards will never take me back to. Over time, their luster falls towards matte, while my own skin grows paler than ever before. Here, at the far end of floorboard number 14, in blue socks and family shadows in Fingal, on the far side of the water. 10 years ago, in Amsterdam, on the Lijnbaansgracht, tied to canal wall, I lived on a boat 24 floorboards wide, but for its bed in the bow only 2 boards deep. I lived there for a year and never considered that it took me nowhere. Here, in this room, on the northern edge of Dublin, the Dutch streets run along floorboard number 3, and sometimes when I reach a certain point in that board, I stop and remove my socks, hoping to feel the run of current over stilled toe, and remember what it was like when I danced on the water. And finally today, I'm going to leave you with a poem from the Storms Journal issue 2. I thought it was fitting to leave you with a poem from the journal because we are currently looking for submissions for issue 3. We're looking for poetry, prose and visual arts, and by we I mean myself, Damien B, Donnelly, and my fantastic sub-editor, Nitty Casa. Now, this poem I'm going to leave you with is also fitting because it is the poem that Matt Gilbert sent in to be selected for issue 2. This is Flaming Bench. A miracle took place down at the park the other week. An ordinary bench, peeling with green paint, chewed gum stuck underneath, was transmuted below unruly holly. Through the sparking jolt of an old-fashioned snog, full force teen as if after school, but starring seasoned adults, changing the nature of the hour, rekindling faith in touch, launching an urgent voyage back toward the body, burning off the dust of failure, recalibrated as release, an act of mercy, a tender elbow, taken to expired emotion. Thank you so much, Matt, and congratulations on Street Sailing. What an evening, afternoon or morning it's been here over at Eat the Storms, your poetry podcast, which has now reached the end of episode 3, season 7. Once again, a huge shout out to the stars of today's show, and they were Tim Relf, Terri Metcalfe, Alex Scott, Hiram Larew, and the author of our collection of the week, Matt Gilbert. And Matt's collection, Street Sailing, published by Black Bough Poetry, is now available to buy over at blackbowpoetry.com. And there's a link to that on today's blog post, which you can find over at www.eatthestorms.com. Click on the link, listen to the podcast, and there you will find a blog post for every episode. This, as I said, was episode 3, season 7, and there in that post you will find guest bios, photos, social media handles, and websites, so you can continue to admire and be awed. And of course, a thank you to you, our exceptional listeners, for tuning in today, tonight, tomorrow, or perhaps yesterday on platforms like Spotify, Apple, Google, Breaker, Pocket Cast, Castbox, Podcast Addicts, Player FM, or iTunes. Now remember, the submissions are currently open for our Journal of Poetry, Prose and Visual Arts, simply called The Storms. So if you are a poet, a prose writer, a flash fiction writer, or a painter, photographer, digital artist, please drop over to eatthestorms.com and find out all the details. And once again, thank you so much to the oh-so-supportive Fingal Arts Office. Myself and my extraordinary sub-editor Nitty Casa cannot wait to see your offerings. Issue 3's theme is Shelter, Sanctuary, Sanctum. So dive deep and submit soon. You have until 11:59 p.m. on the 24th of June. Now, if you are listening to this episode on Saturday the 3rd of June, then please join me tomorrow night on Sunday the 4th of June, thanks to the fantastic poet and writing community supporter Finn Hall, when I will be headlining at Like a Blot from the Blue. There is a link to that in today's website, and I will be joined by a host of fantastic poets from all around the world, and I'm very excited to read more poems from my collection Enough, which was my first full collection published by the Hedgehog Poetry Press just last year, based on my time living in Paris. But that's it for me for today, so thank you so much to you for joining us. We hope to see you again next week. The new episode drops every Saturday from 5 p.m. in your preferred podcast platform. You've been exceptional, my guests have been wonderful, and I've been bloody damn brilliant. And by I mean me, Damien B. Donnelly. And until next time we share our time together, please do me a favour and stay bloody poetic.
Oh, thank you.